Dave Ramsey, Financial Guru Review in 3, 2, 1. Hey guys, welcome to the Will and Cody Show. We've got a awesome show planned for you guys. We are going to be doing a new series called our Financial Guru Review, where we review financial gurus.
Try to say that a few times fast. Guru Review. That's our
Guru Review.
I'm going to trademark that.
I've been practicing in the shower. I got it right today.
Guru Review.
Guru Review. Guru Review. And so today's guru that we'll be reviewing is none other than the financial Sith Lord himself, Dave Ramsey.
That's right.
Now,
for those of you who don't
William
know,
explain why he's a Sith Lord.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Dave Ramsey is a Sith Lord, and I know that's confusing for anyone who's never seen Star Wars, but if you have, it's very funny.
Or Dave Ramsey.
Or Dave Ramsey. I guess you're really confused. But a quote in Star Wars that gets said about the Sith is that only the Sith have absolutes. And Dave Ramsey loves absolutes. And so somebody made the joke a while back, and it's kind of just stuck, that Dave Ramsey is possibly a Sith Lord because he loves absolutes. And only the Sith like absolutes. So it just kind of fit, and it stuck with him. And so, yeah, we're going to talk about him a little bit
quick.
today.
Who said that in Star Wars?
I think, was it Obi-Wan who said that?
It was Obi-Wan, yeah.
Got it. I mean, really, if you want to question anything, Obi-Wan probably said it.
He probably did.
All the good lines.
So, but yeah, he only deals in absolutes. I've been listening to his radio show forever, and never has he said, well, I guess in your case,
it depends.
No, it depends. Yeah. He's never said it depends in his life. He's
it's
got
always one or the other
idea, and it is you should do that or you should not do that for 100%. Just about everything. So, we'll go ahead and give a little overview, and then we'll just jump right into our thoughts, kind of the teachings of Dave. But this one's gonna be fun for us because Dave is kind of the first guru that we know of and have studied, and in fact our the internship that we talk about a lot about was under a Dave Ramsey referral at the time. Our financial advisor, he was one of the if you look for a SmartVestor Pro on Dave's website, you'd get him in that area. And so these things are like ingrained in us, and so
I was gonna say that was like my that was my really first big exposure, I think. I mean, I'd heard of Dave before, but that's when I really like got to understand actually what he teaches and all those kind of stuff. Was during that time. That was really my first exposure to it, and then it was kind of ingrained from that point on.
Yeah, I even think we listened to like the Dave Ramsey show on the way to the internship.
Yeah,
and then you worked on your Dave Ramsey impersonation. And it was pretty.
I never got it down. I don't think it was as good,
but it's close.
I couldn't do. I forgot I was working on that. I just thought it would be a good comedic value of being able to say things in Dave Ramsey's voice would be really funny. But I thank you for reminding me that I actually should go back and try to see if I can learn a little bit.
Next episode, we'll see how far William's gotten in acting like Dave Ramsey.
Okay, I'll work on my Dave Ramsey voice.
Right quick, he started out, he got like his bachelor's degree at University of Tennessee, on bachelor's of science in finance and real estate. And I'm kidding, I like Tennessee. In 1986, he amassed a significant portfolio of over $4 million. Most of that was real estate. And during the Competitive Equality Banking Act of 1987, several banks changed ownership and then recalled about 1.2 million of the loans and line of credit that he was leveraging. And he was unable to pay that, and then ultimately filed for bankruptcy in 88. And so between 88 and about 92, he kind of created a system where he says that he read the Bible, he studied what he thinks God had, what thinks about how you should handle money. And he kind of created a little system for himself. And then in 92, wrote a book called Financial Peace. And it started a local radio station, radio show. And it just kind of blew up from there. He created the Financial Peace University. And then now he is probably one of the biggest financial gurus to date.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, at least, most people that I talk to that, have usually heard of Dave, in some form or the other. Did you read that from Wikipedia?
I did.
That was very well said. I was going to say,
I tried to make it look like I wasn't reading, but
if not, it was very impressive. So I was like, man, he has got these stats ready to go.
Like 1988, just right there.
Like, boom, ready to go. So that's a little bit of history on Dave. And I think you'll notice, as you look into what he talks about, I think that experience of, kind of, he's, seemed pretty knowledgeable in investments and stuff, but it was over leveraged at a difficult time. And so, that came back to get him, and end up losing it all. And so I think you'll, as we walk through like what he says, you're going to see that throughout. If you can really see that experience of losing everything really shaped like what he says. And so you'll notice like a lot of things are very conservative, of like, not taking a lot of risks, of being very, kind of by the book, when things come to debt, and we'll get into that. But I just wanted to note too, when I first heard about, his kind of life and what he happened, you can definitely see that affected the way that he thinks about money and the way he teaches. Is because he's very much avoiding the catastrophe. That's really what he's trying to get is, how do you get successful, but without that risk of, it falling apart. So he's really trying to avoid that. That at least is one theme that I kind of picked up on from that. But I think he's still in Tennessee now. And so he still has, the radio show that he does. I don't listen to that as much anymore. Every once in a while I'll listen a little bit, or it's always funny to see like, somebody will post a clip of him yelling at somebody for making a bad money choice or something. So you can listen to that and kind of get a kick out of him throwing a little fit. And then I have been through the Financial Peace course. That was something I went through a few years ago. And then I hadn't read Total Money Makeover. I think it's his most popular book until recently. And so I actually just read that last year just to kind of refresh on it and to say that, I read it. And I think it helps also in this discussion of him. But yeah, really, it's just kind of like, I think he's out there enough. And I would say, I think he's one of the foremost names, I would say, at least in, kind of the personal finance area.
Yeah. I did forget to mention that he's written a ton of books, and they are very good. And Total Money Makeover is probably the one I'd go to. Financial Peace was his first book. That's now kind of a course. And if you can take it, it's great. In fact, now you don't have to pay $130 and go find a local church to do it. You can actually do it online in an app, and I think it's like $10 a month, and then you get his budgeting app. And that's what I did. I paid the $10 for 1 month, did the whole course, and then stopped paying for it. So,
gotcha.
But yeah, so we'll go ahead and start jumping into kind of what he teaches. Now, there's a lot. I mean, he has an entire radio show, and he does kind of sticks with the same stuff he's been teaching for like 20, 30 years. But every once in a while, we'll get, like, as times change, he'll have a take on it. And so we're not going to be able to cover everything because there's just so much stuff, but we're going to go through what we think is the basics, the building blocks of what he teaches. And the first is the baby steps. And that's his biggest one.
Yeah.
Of you're in a load of crap and you need to get out of it. You need to follow the baby steps and you'll become wealthy. Now I'm about to quiz William. What are the baby steps?
So I cheated a little bit. I had it up just in case I forgot. But I'm going to try to do it without looking. So you can let me know if I'm off. But basically the baby,
he's looking right at my eyes. He's not looking at his other screen.
I'm not.
There you
go. But basically the baby steps are pretty much the bread and butter plan of what Dave Ramsey is pretty much all about. And the first few steps are kind of getting out of any, I would say, like hole you're in financially, and then kind of getting on a level playing field. And then the rest of the steps are kind of maintaining or improving once you kind of get on a little more stable footing. So quickly, the first baby step he recommends is saving a starter emergency fund, which is $1,000. So just $1,000 in a bank account. That way, if anything goes wrong, you have that to fall back on. Baby step 2, which is his big thing that he pushes a lot, is paying off all debt except for the house. So this is credit card debt, student loans, car payments, any of that other kind of stuff, paying that off as a top priority. And again, like I said, you can see that his life experience coming into the order in which he put things. And so he has that in baby step 2. Baby step 3 is once you've got the debt taken care of, then you raise a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. So this is like a bulked up emergency fund that you're going to be able to use going forward. So you take it from your 1,000 from the first step and bump it up. And then baby step 4, 5, and 6 are kind of done relatively the same time. It's not like it's chronological as much. But 4 is investing 15% into retirement and 15% of your gross income into retirement. Baby step 5 is paying off the house. Is that 5? Or is that kids' college?
It's kids' college.
Ah, so close. That's right. Okay, baby step 5 is saving for your kids' college. If you want to do that, saving up for that. And then baby step 6 is paying off your house early, which is, I think, what he talks about, paying off your house early, which is another one of his points. And then baby step 7 is basically just continue to build wealth and give generously. So I almost did it.
Almost.
But that's basically like the blueprint. If you want to know the bread and butter of Dave, that's pretty much going to be it. If you know those baby steps, that's going to be pretty much what he's going to preach. And there's some other variation stuff, Cody, kind of off of that, of like bigger points that he'll talk about. But really, those are kind of the foundational things.
Yeah. Each baby step kind of has like its own page on his website of what he recommends doing it. Like when it comes to the starter emergency fund, he's just saying like scrounge everything you can to come up with $1,000, whatever you got to do. And then like in baby step 2, where it's saying like pay all consumer debt, you basically everything except the house. He wants you to do that through the debt snowball, which we've talked about before.
Yep.
And it is a great way to pay off debt. It's not the only way, but it is a great way. And he preaches debt snowball 100%. And then the 3 to 6 months fully funded emergency fund, that's your expenses, 3 to 6 months of expenses. And then the 15% of your household income in retirement, baby step 4. He kind of tells you how to invest that. We've talked about that a little bit. Like if you have a 401k available, do your employee match and then do a Roth IRA, put that up to the max, and then you go back to the 401k. And then if you have a Roth 401k, use that. And, just a whole bunch of stuff. And we've talked about the tax freeness of Roths and stuff like that. So we won't get into that. But the 4, 5, and 6 that you were talking about, you do those in order, but you do them at the same time. So so for example, if you can't do all 3, then you focus on the first 2. And if you can't do those 2, you focus on the first one until you can do it. So you want to do them at the same time. That's the goal. But you want to start investing 15%. Once you're able to, then you start saving for the kids' college. And then once you're able to do that, then you pay off the home early. But the goal is to do all those at the same time. And then, of course, the step 7, build wealth.
Right.
So, but if you ever want to learn more detail, just go on his website. You can click each baby step, and there's a page just explaining, more detail of how he says to accomplish that.
Yeah. And I would say the big, other than this, the big topics for Dave that a lot of people bring up is his view on debt. He's very much against all debt. And I think he even says like he would love for you not to even have a mortgage on your house, if you could pay for it cash, which is just crazy in today's market. But, that would be preferred. So that's really the only area where he says, he'll allow you, to have some debt. So he's very anti-debt. And even, very anti-credit cards. That's been a lot of, a big issue that people go back and forth with him on, is he's very much against using credit cards at all. So even if you can use them wisely, he, again, a man of absolutes. And I think he kind of has to be in some things or just chooses to be. And so, he's very much against that, at all. One thing I will also say that I think a lot of people know him for is kind of this aggressive mentality around paying off debt and getting financially in a little bit better footing if you're like, just say in a hole with debt, as he talks about like gazelle intensity. So I think that's one thing people know him for is a lot of plans may be like, okay, slowly work into it. And he's like, no, you got to crawl and you got to fight and, you got to sacrifice whatever you can. He's very serious about like trying to get away from, debt and things like that. If you're kind of buried in it. So that's one thing that is unique about Dave is he's very passionate about like, you sacrifice whatever you got to do. Whereas other people are like, do what works with your lifestyle type thing.
Yeah.
So he's very, focused, I guess I would say.
One of his quotes is sell everything until the kids think they're next.
Right. Yeah. He's very aggressive. Go after it with all you've got, attack it. And that kind of, formulates into, to that. And then along the lines of debt, another thing is like, he's big on like a 15-year mortgage on your house. If you're going to do a mortgage, he says 15 years. And also, I think he says 20% down would be like his ideal target.
Preferred, yeah.
Again, it's all behind the mentality of reducing the amount of debt and your exposure to debt, in the long run. So that all kind of feeds into that.
Yeah. And that mortgage payment only being 25% of your take-home pay.
Right. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, so it's just difficult.
Yeah, very difficult, unfortunately, in this market.
Yeah. And then also big on zero-based budget. I'll just say I use a zero-based budget as well. I know some people that use percentages and things like that to calculate their numbers, but my wife and I seem, zero-based kind of works with the way that we think about money and allocating it. So that works for us. So I will say similar to Dave, I kind of like a zero-based. It just works for us, but I don't think it's the end all if you use a different one. And I'm already getting into my opinion, but but Dave is big on zero-based budget. And he's also picky about insurance, right? Like, yeah. I think that's another topic that he's pretty picky about what you use and what you don't.
Yeah, like car insurance, you want to get as much as possible, which I recommend, as much coverage as possible. Liability on, your used cars. And then if you have a new car, you shouldn't have a new car. He will tell you
Forgot about that too.
Or to pay it off early.
And he's cash for cars. No car payment at all.
He'll talk about his retreads or something on his old car that he had, where he wouldn't buy new tires. He got like a retread. I've never heard of that, but apparently you can do that.
Interesting.
Where you like put new treads on old tires. And then he like sold his nice car and bought an old beater. So cash cars, huge thing for him. But insurance, only liability. Of course, you got to have full coverage if you got a new car. But of course, he's going to tell you to sell it or pay it off ASAP, and then have liability and as much coverage as possible on that. He talks about like an umbrella policy if you have over $1 million in net worth. He talks about only having term life.
That's right. Yeah,
insurance
on term.
And no whole life whatsoever. No excuse for whole life. Always have term, 20 to 30 years on the term. And then you want to have as much of 10 to 12 times your yearly gross income. And the logic for that is, let's say you get like, maybe make $50,000 a year, and then 10 times that would be 500,000. Well, potentially you could put that into he would say a growth stock mutual fund, or something that's getting maybe 8 to 10%. Sometimes we'll say 12% of in some fund, and then that would create $50,000 a year to be able to give an income to whoever you were leaving when you pass away.
Right.
So that's the insurance, and then he's also really big on having a will, and that's pretty smart. Yeah, definitely have a will.
I do appreciate wills.
There. Yeah. Nice.
Nice. See what I did there? Yeah. So he's big on that. And again, with the absolutes, it's very much, this is what he says, and, abide with that. There was another thought I had that I totally just blanked on. With investing too. Another thing that Dave, preaches with doing your 15% towards retirement is his allocation of what to invest in. He's big on mutual funds. That's, I think, what I was coming back to. He's a big mutual fund guy. Actively managed mutual funds, which are, have got some higher fees to them. But that's what he would recommend. And then his mix that he says is equal parts. So 25% in each one of these. He says in growth mutual funds, growth and income mutual funds, aggressive growth mutual funds, and international mutual funds. And all these would be stocks. So that's really the mix that he would recommend when you're doing that, that baby step 4 in investing 15% of your household income, into that. So that's kind of a little bit, about Dave and kind of the key things. At least I think, would you say that? Oh, and then also he's well known, like, for back in the day, the envelope system. Like, that was a big thing of his. I was trying to remember that too, of, instead of using a credit card or even a debit card, about taking the money out every month and putting it in little envelopes and then keeping track so that when the envelope is empty, then you're done with that budget category. And so I think that's one thing too that a lot of people may remember him from, or kind of one of their first exposures to him, from that old system.
Which, by the way, was actually a Larry Burkett idea. That
everything is either, there's nothing new under the sun. Later. Yeah.
That's actually a Dave quote too.
Is it really?
Yeah, he says it all the time. Couple of things I forgot on insurance. I just pulled up my notes here. He advocates for having long-term disability insurance, long-term care insurance, depending on some things. We can get into that some other time. Identity theft protection.
Right.
And then, of course, you need to have health insurance, stuff like that.
Yeah. So big on those insurances. And again, I would say that's, kind of going back to that, make sure you're covered mentality. And limit kind of those things. Would you say there's really any other like themes that you'd say with what Dave preaches?
Would be probably
right.
The last theme that I could think of as far as what he teaches is just living and giving. Well, his quote is, you live like no one else, so one day you can live and give like no one else. And so the ultimate goal is to give away your wealth. And I really like that. That is a good goal to have and a reason to build wealth.
Right. And kind of share it, instead of keeping it kind of balled up yourself along this process, being generous and being kind to those who have been working their way through. But yeah, I would say that's definitely a theme, throughout that, especially the last step, that's pretty much the step is, once you've kind of reached that. Spending that time giving and sharing with others. I will say another theme I noticed just practically, and this is getting a little more into like, maybe the pros and cons of what Dave says, is he's very much like a human discipline over a math kind of guy. In, a lot of things he says he's going to go with what's more practical as a, a discipline that you can build up rather than what does the math say is the best return. So like an example that you brought up with debt is he believes in the Snowball Method. And Cody and I have talked about this before. So if you not sure what we're talking about, I think we have an old video out there where we talk about this. But the Snowball versus the Avalanche Method. Now, the Avalanche, technically, mathematically, it says you should pay off your debt faster. But the Snowball Method is much more into, your discipline and kind of seeing those small victories and slowly build up until you, can pay everything off rather than getting discouraged maybe like, 6 months or a year into this whole process. So he's very much on like human thoughts and how we think about things and our momentum, and aligning things to kind of help move that momentum along our journey rather than just saying, what does the math say? He's very much like a practical, like how do humans think and behave, and then structure things that way, versus of going with just the math.
Yeah. Yeah. His quote is, if finances was a math problem, then no one would have a financial problem, but it's not, it's a behavior problem. That's why everybody has an issue usually with finances.
Right.
But yeah, I think those are the general themes. We'll start jumping into our thoughts, pros, cons on it. But I will say before we get into that we joke and we pick on Dave for dealing in absolutes. If you follow his plan to a T, then I have no doubt that you will build a form of wealth and do pretty well for yourself. I have no doubt in that. Now, there are some people out there that we call the Ramsey-ish or Dave-ish if you were ever on the Dave Ramsey subreddit, just about everybody on there says they're Dave-ish.
Dave-ish,
where they take certain themes that they like and then they apply those, and then they have some different approaches. When it comes to debt, Will and I are basically on the same page with Dave. We really like his plan on debt, the hatred of debt. We don't like that. When we get into things like investments and stuff like that, we might look a little different.
Yeah, I view debt a little bit differently, I'd say. I mean, I appreciate his sentiment that you don't want to have abundant debt, like just out there, especially credit cards. That just, credit card balances outstanding. That's just a ton of interest. So just practically, I don't think that's the case. I might not be as much anti it as Dave is, but I definitely agree. Like the sentiment is, usually it's not as good for you if it's not in the right place. If it's more of a consumer debt, then just that's not the area that you want to have it. So definitely Absolutely. On the same page with him on that. And then, as you mentioned, like we definitely differ on things, that we, don't agree with him 100%, on. Yeah. So there's plenty of things where we're Dave-ish or, so as far completely as, disagree.
Pros and cons, like really isn't much of a con to his plan, except for the fact that if you don't do it 100% and you call him on his radio show, he's going to tell you about it. That's right. Probably the only real con. Yeah. Like you probably should call him and let him know.
Yeah. I know I've seen some people say he's either too extreme or that it's too slow. It is a very slow plan. Part of some of the things he says no to is because it's risky. There's some risk involved. But I think a lot of people would maybe point out, with some risk, there is reward. So maybe you could get to your journey faster than he would, recommend. So it's very much tortoise and the hare type thing. And I think he even talks about that sometimes, about he's very much the slow and steady consistency type of a plan. So to Cody's point, I think for most people, and I think this is why Dave is the man of absolutes, is because if he's speaking to such a broad audience, it's tough to tailor it to every person. And I think we may have said this before, but I think personal finance is personal. I think it depends on you and what's best for your situation. But I think what Dave tries to do, and maybe he's, some people would say he does too much of this, is form just a general outline for the average person. Most people, what they can safely do. And I think they would still reach success. If what Cody said, if you follow his plan to a T, I still think you would be better off than most people. I think you could get to a point where you're financially independent. It may take you a while. But I think, in general, if you follow his principles, I think you'll do okay. And I think that's most people's criticism is they would say, well, you just do okay, as opposed to some others. But
I think you would do more than okay. I think you'll do really well, but it's kind of like, do you want a plan that is like basically proven almost? I don't know of a failure, of if you follow this to a T that you wouldn't have some form of wealth and wouldn't be successful. It is a point A to point B, probably to most people's goals. But the idea that it is the only point A to point B is where we're kind of like, maybe not so much. And like you said, personal finance is personal. So I wouldn't say that's like a con per se, because it's a good plan. It works. But as far as your individual needs and such, it may not meet that exactly. Or it may be a big drag trying to do the whole program, without some form of variation. Like, for example, right now, and I'll put this as a con, Dave does tend to, since the plan has been working for 30 years, he tends to not see new ideas as good. We have some criticisms about his opinions of like ETFs. He doesn't like new commodities. Like the idea of cryptocurrency just baffles him. I don't think he's ever even studied it or even thought about it. He just says no. Right. And I'm not saying cryptocurrency is a good investment, but he doesn't give an actual reason. He just says it's a scam or a Ponzi scheme or a pyramid scheme, and then just says no and then moves on.
Yeah,
exactly. So, that's my concern or con would be there's no variation at all. There's no changing in technology. There's no changing with the times as far as the plan. Like, why is it $1,000? It was $1,000 in 1992 when financial peace was created as the baby step. I'm sure inflation from $1,000 then to now, probably a lot. So everybody says, okay, what should that be now?
Right.
But then if you think about it, and I think he's talked about this, he has been criticized on that. He said it's really not more about the 1,000. It's just more about having something. But I do think maybe in like another 10, 20 years, this plan might need to be revised.
Right. Because that might be nothing.
Anything.
Yeah. It might not be worth anything.
Exactly.
That's a good point.
That's a con that I've got.
Yeah, I definitely say, that could be a con. And I will say, like, I used to be, really like, yeah, I'm going to try to, do everything the way he says it. And I'm going to be honest, just like life hits you and you realize like things are not going to be as ideal as maybe you hope they're going to be. So even to a lot of, what his recommendations are, and I think in a good scenario that, it'd definitely be great. But in real life of what's practical, it may actually be a little bit different. And so you've got to find a little bit of the areas of what are your areas you're going to not budge on, and this is what you're going to do. And you may have to, it may take you longer, but if you follow this plan, I think you will succeed. It just may look a little bit differently than what you had in your head, because some of these things are going to be tough to do. Like, saving up that much maybe for a down payment on a house, or even being able to afford the monthly payment according to his things. Like I'm in his mind, I'm way overspending on my rent, but for me, this is really cheap and this is, the best I could find, you know what I mean? So it's like, I'm not going to move to a different city just to make it under that rule. I'm trying my best, but, some of the things it's more for me, just about being practical, about what I can actually do and actually find versus this ideal standard of the rule.
Right.
So I guess that's some con you get a little bit with the rigidness of the plan. But I think for some others, maybe it's a good push of like, instead of just settling of like, I'm going to reach for that high standard and try to get there.
Some of them are great goals, like that 25% of your gross, or I'm sorry, your net income, but it's a big difference, gross versus net.
Right.
On 25% of your net income to housing.
I mean, if you could do that, that would be so great. Like that would allow you to set
amazing.
So much money aside. And it would put you so far ahead as far as, your cost of living.
Me to do that, I literally would have to move 100 miles away from work to be able to find a place of rent.
Or you just got to make more.
I just got to make more. There you go.
I guess that's the solution. You got to make more.
That's the solution. You just got to make more. And, that's fine. That's a good goal to have. But I gotta make what, $30,000 more in the next month so that way I can have the Ramsey plan. Like, come on. Yeah. So what my wife and I do instead is we just find another place to maybe not eat out so much, maybe find other places in the budget. Now, if we're talking like more than 50%, now Will and I might say that's a little too much.
Right. That's getting up there. Yeah.
That 25%, that's a great goal, but I just don't know how conceivable that is, especially in today's market. Another thing would be getting a 15-year and having 20% down. I mean, that's big. I don't know if you guys looked on Zillow. That's a chunk of change.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And then so just not being able to have a 30-year. But what happens if it's cheaper than renting?
Right.
There's some arguments to be had there. So, we're not going to tell you which one you should do, but we're just saying that sometimes it's not absolutes. One more absolute I'll tell you that I forgot is that Dave says all the time is that you can't buy a new car unless you have a net worth of $1 million.
Yeah, that one.
That was my favorite.
That one, I think that's more just his opinion, because it's like, what is that based on? Like, why $1 million?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I wonder if he comes up with opinions and he's just like, okay, that's fact. And then he just writes it down.
That needs to be a standard. The other, I guess, con that some people point out, and I'm starting like to not agree with some aspects of this, is his investment advice. I think you could do a lot better than what he recommends. I wouldn't say it's some parts of it I wouldn't say are harmful in what he recommends. So I think you could do okay. Other parts I'm like, yeah, I really don't like that as much. And so what I'm saying with that is the investment mix that he says to invest in, I just think you could do better than that. I think you could do, maybe expand a little bit more. But the real thing is, some of the mutual funds he'll recommend, and I'm a fan of mutual funds. I prefer those and ETFs. I like that kind of stuff. Is some of the things he recommends does have a lot of fees associated with it. And so some people have criticized him for that, of recommending investments that are very high fees instead of investing in similar things that are just cheaper. It's not any riskier. You're not investing in single stocks or options or anything like that. It's still a fund, but there's just some cheaper options out there where you can get the same return without as high of a fee. And so I think that's one consideration I would also give is to a lot of the things he recommends. They do charge you high fees, and I think you have to consider the fees in an investment like that because it really adds up. So that'd be another con I would say with his plan is they're very stable things that he recommends. And he says you'll get really high returns with it. I don't know how. He always throws out really high numbers. But I would be worried about the fees, involved, in that before I jumped into something like that.
Yeah. I'm glad you reminded me that if you read any of his books and he says 12 to 14% return,
right.
Just do 8%. Just redo that calculation in there. I don't know where he gets that or how, and he swears that he does, but if you read Total Money Makeover and you are doing the retirement plan, and you're like, if you have this much and you're getting 12 to 13% annual return on it, you'll be a millionaire.
Right.
Try 8 to 10.
Right.
S&P 500 does 9.8. So
another thing too is like there's a certain calculation, and we should do another discussion about this sometime as far as the expected withdrawal rate in retirement. So there was an old thing about the 4% rule that if you took 4% of your portfolio, every, as a return, and that you should be able to withstand for the long haul because then it's earning more. You're basically, if you're earning 8% and then only taking 4% out, your portfolio should continue to grow, not deplete. Well, so most people use 4%. And I saw somebody joking that Dave was using 8% as his withdrawal rate. And people are like, how do you get 8%? Because he was expecting 12% returns. So then he could justify withdrawing 8% of your, investments. And a lot of people were like, no, if you're expecting it to, grow that much, it just doesn't add up. If it actually only grows like 8%, then you're taking out, your balance is just going to stay the same, rather than continue to grow. So that's, another area, that Dave is kind of a little off with that as far as the expectations you can have with it. But I definitely think one thing with Dave, I think it's a good everyday, I think he had a book named this, but Everyday Millionaire Plan. I think it's a good, this will work for most people. Maybe with a little bit of fluctuation, as Cody and I have said, and where we think there should be a little more wiggle room. But I think it's a plan that's easy enough to understand. And I think he has to keep it general in a lot of things, because I think he's appealing to a larger audience. Then whereas Cody and I can say, well, for a small percentage of people, we think this is okay. Or for some people, I think that's fine. I think he's on purpose very specific and rigid with that. Since I think most people could somewhat use his plan and it would work out for them.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, there's so much more to cover in this topic.
I know. I keep thinking of more things that I want to, say.
We've been studying Dave a lot, and so we're probably as big as critics, but we're also fans.
Yeah,
too.
that's one thing. One thing I want to say too is like I go back and forth because I've seen it. Last thought, I promise. I've seen people go through his plan and it really affect their life. Like people I know, not just the things he puts on, as promos, but I've seen it really affect people's life and be able to help them reach the financial success that they want to. So I've seen it work in other people's lives. And so that's one reason that I'm like, yeah, I appreciate what he does. But also too, as I grow in my knowledge, there's things that I'm like, man, I disagree with Dave on that, or man, I really don't like what he says about that. And so there's some things I'm not like yeah, Dave, 100%. Because there's definitely some things I don't see eye to eye with him on, but I also appreciate the help that he does in helping a lot of people become debt free and on their journey, rather than burdened with stress of debt and really just their money controlling them, and really helping them get control and find peace, financial peace along this. So it's hard not to appreciate that in some aspects, even if I may disagree with some parts of the plan. It's hard to ignore the amount of people that he's been able to help. So those are kind of the two balances I have to strike, with this. I may not agree with everything, and I find more and more every day that I disagree with, but you can't argue with, the people that I have seen that it has been a help, even if it's not ideal, even if it might be rigid, it has helped some. So, yeah.
And I'll throw one more thing in. If we actually forgot, this is another theme of Dave's, and it just came off the top of my head, but he does get a lot of people out of debt. And I really like that. A lot of people get out of debt.
Yeah, that's
and
a big thing.
He has the dead scream on his show. And so people will come, they'll visit him at the Ramsey Solutions headquarters, and they will be on the show, and then they'll go into like this little box or something, and they just scream, "We're debt free." And that's always fun to see, and they'll post that on social media. And I really like that. And there's some crazy numbers. Like people saying, we paid $350,000 of student loans, or we did this, and it's crazy. Stuff. Yeah. So seeing stuff like that is really encouraging. So Dave does a lot of good stuff, but we do have some
critiques.
Opinions,
we got some opinions. That's all right.
So our rating for the Idiot's Guide to Finances, written by a Sith Lord, is what number should we give him?
I would say I'd give him I'd give him a point for every baby step. So I'd give him a 7 out of 10.
We're giving a 7 out of 10
easy.
for the baby steps. Dave, if you change your investment strategy, and you talk about, if you say something nice about ETFs, we'll give you an 8.
We may bump it up to an 8. If he changes some of his stuff, we may bump it to an 8. So I think most part, you're doing all right. So yeah, let's give him a point for every baby step. So 7 out of 10.
Dave Ramsey, 7 out of 10.
I'm sure he appreciates this. He's going to tune in. He's been waiting on this,
he's been I should just call him right now. Just let him know I gave him his rating. So 7 out of 10. So if you guys enjoyed that, if you want a part 2, because we didn't cover it a lot, and I understand that. So if you guys are like, hey, you forgot about this part, like Cody, you almost forgot about the dead scream. How could you do that? Hit us up on social media or go to our website, www.willandcody.com. Hit our contact us page. Let us know if you'd like for us to have a part 2 of this. Maybe we'll adjust our number. Right now it's 7. And if you are like, hey, if you've got like some other areas that you want us to cover, stuff like that, we'd love to go into part 2. But we do want to get into another guru. If you guys
if you guys know another guru that you want us to do a review of and kind of dig into, let us know.
Exactly.
So we've got a few we're thinking about, but if you have any that you're like, yeah, I'd love you to dig into that, person, then let us know, and we'll look into them.
I've got like Robert Kiyosaki in the back of my mind right now, doing the Rich Dad Poor Dad. But I've actually know a couple people who are like Grant Cardone fans, and then we've also got the Money Guys. We're kind of fans of them too. We like listening to them.
I like the Money Guys. Yeah.
There's we could even go into some Ramsey personalities like Chris Hogan and some other people. So there's a lot out there. And so if you guys have one you want us to review, we'd be more than happy to hear from you and consider it and make it an episode. So definitely send us your thoughts on that, and we'll hopefully do one in the future. We'll probably do one maybe every other month or so. Yeah. Next week, we're going to have a great story from William to tell you why we are 2 weeks late on this one. And it's going to be great. It's going to be super loaded. He just told me the story, and it's great. So
buckle up.
I love it.
It's story time.
Buckle up. Yeah, buckle up. That's funny. That's like a spoiler. Anyway, a little bit. So anyway, guys, if you enjoyed that, let us know. www.willandcody.com. Hit our contact us page. But anyway, guys, we will see you next time.
See you guys.